to see Scribbler here, aka Rob Finet, and I am here for another Gish optimization guide for you guys. And this evening we've got a really nice treat for you, the Hexblade-Fighter, which I am also calling the Raven Queen's Herald. Now, this optimization guide will include optimization through feats, multiclassing, and spell selection in particular. I find that often optimization guides don't necessarily include a lot of tweaks for spell selection. And since the Hexblade is really reliant on spells that are particularly long lasting, or that have an outsized effect in combat, because being a warlock you're limited in the number of slots, but you get a lot of extra punch. We're going to focus a lot more on optimization through spell selection or optimization through the use of our spell slots. So getting into this build, um, we are going to coin a term here. I don't know. Possible that someone else has used the term checks fighter. So this is a hexblade fighter that is going to be charisma based. We are not going to focus on dexterity, and we are not going to focus on strength. We're going to primarily be sad, which is actually going to make us happy because we're going to be single attribute dependent, that is charisma dependent. So hence we get our C for charisma, then hexblade, so checks fighter. Now I'm calling this a spank and flank kind of build. And the reason why I'm calling it spank and flank is because this build will focus primarily on dealing very heavy damage, particularly as a Nova build in melee. And the way we are going to set up to deal this heavy damage throughout most of the build is to, as Crow puts it, have a nice flank buddy right now. Crow is my flank buddy, right? So he's going to help me as a Hexblade fighter deal some pretty massive damage, right, Crow? Well, no, not really. He's just a nice fluffy cat, but he makes for a good prop example for our flank buddy, which we are going to use extensively from, I'd say, about level 7-ish, 6 or 7, on through mid-teens through this build. So for much of our career, we're going to be relying very heavily on a flank buddy who's going to help us deliver heavy damage. So that's a good overview. So let's get into it. At level 1, for our stats, we're going to jump right in with charisma, and we're going to use point buy. So for the most part, this is going to be an AL Adventure League legal build. Some game masters, we're also going to talk a little bit about Strixhaven. Some game masters do not allow Strixhaven because they consider the backgrounds to be overpowered, and I can certainly understand that. But we're gonna have a note here on Strixhaven, because if your game master does allow Strixhaven, you don't want to hobble yourself by not choosing one of those amazing backgrounds that are available. But jumping right in, we're going to start out with point buy. We're going to start out with 27 points, and we're going to start out by dumping 9 into charisma, which will give us a 15 in our starting stat for that, which is really solid. Not much more to say about that other than that charisma is going to be our main stat all throughout this build, which we mentioned earlier. Moving on, we are also going to be focusing a lot on, well, a little bit more on Constitution as well. And Constitution is going to be our secondary stat for this build, and it's pretty important for a number of reasons. One of them being that we are going to want to be good at concentrating on spells, because we're going to be using our spells long term, as I mentioned before. And one key component of that is having a high constitution. In addition, because we're going to be in melee and we're not primarily a fighter build. We're only really just kind of dipping into fighter. We're going to need those extra hit points from the high constitution, and we don't really want to be item dependent for that. We want to have a reliable source of extra hit points. So we're also going to throw 9 stat points into constitution, giving us a 15 before our racial choice. Here's a token for a version of this build that I am presently playing in one of Ted Burgess's games. If you followed this stream, you've seen me play a lot with Ted Burgess. This is a version of Beatrice Luciel, but not the one that I'm writing about in the Helki Fantasy series. This is a little darker, more artistic version of Beatrice. So I thought I'd throw the token in so you guys could look at that. But don't want to get distracted too much. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our third most important stat, which is dexterity. And this is not really like a super major stat for us, but we're going to want to have a high dexterity for a relatively high dexterity for a number of reasons. First is we're going to be using medium armor as opposed to heavy armor. And we're going to want to have max out our medium armor bonus. We're also going to want to have decent dexterity saves and decent initiative bonuses. Being a melee character who's capable of pouncing on the enemy, being able to have that higher initiative is going to help us out a little bit here. Now, this isn't a focused dexterity build like the Dexodin that I discussed in my last build guide, but dexterity is still important. So we're going to go ahead and throw 5 points into dexterity and get a starting stat of 13 before racial modifiers. Now, so far we spent like a drunken sailor, or in this case, a drunken spanking flanker, on dexterity, constitution, and charisma. This only leaves us with 4 points left for strength, wisdom, and intelligence. I'm going to go ahead and dump strength to 8, putting the other 4 points 2 equally in wisdom and intelligence for 10 wisdom, 10 intelligence, and 8 strength. For you guys, go ahead and do what you want. It's really not super important where you put these extra 4 points. I don't mind dumping strength as much. I really don't like having a low intelligence, and wisdom is really just not a stat I tend to like to dump either. So those are stats. Starting out with 15 constitution, 15 charisma, 14 dexterity, 8 strength, 10 wisdom, and 10 intelligence. So now that we have our base stats, let's talk a little bit about race. And there are a number of races that can really shine for a Hexblade-Fighter, Chex fighter as I call them. And I mean, one of them is variant human. Having that extra feat is really nice. Another is elf, because there are a number of feats that as elf you can unlock that are really helpful. And the variety of elf subtypes provides for all sorts of wonderful options. And the character that I'm playing this build for at present is actually running a variant human, and it is really nice, especially if you want to just go straight Hexblade for the first 17 levels and not have to worry about any kind of delay in getting leveled powers or spells. But for this build guide, I'm going for a more idealized version of our Spankin' Flanker and leveraging in accuracy, particularly at the expense of basically a 1 level delay before some of your powers turn on. So for this build guide, we're going to go with half elf. Now, if you choose variant human or some other race, that's fine. Most of the core bones of this build will remain. But there is one, well, actually a couple of things with half elf that really do help us from a letting perfect be the enemy of the good kind of way of looking at it. So since we take half elf, since we take half elf, we get a +2 stat bonus and a +1 in 2 others. because we are charisma focused, we are going to put our first stat bump of +2 into charisma, giving us a 17. We're going to put our second stat bump into constitution, giving us a 16, and our last stat bump into dexterity, giving us a 14. So this finally rounds us out at 8 strength, 16 constitution, 14 dexterity, 10 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 17 charisma. So a really nice suite of early starting ability scores for our spank and flank Hexblade-Fighter. Um, so so going on to background, I did talk a little bit about Strixhaven. Typically in a build guide, an optimization guide, I wouldn't talk too much about background because background has so far tended to be more flavor related. I mean, it does give you some nice skill options, and some of the features for backgrounds can be pretty cool, but from an optimization standpoint, backgrounds really don't provide a lot of heavy crunch until Wizards of the Coast just recently published Strixhaven, holy power creep Batman, and we end up with these amazing Strixhaven backgrounds. And in particular, with our Raven Queen's Herald, I imagine our Hexblade-Fighter is kind of he or she, in this case, like my character is a female character. She has forged this pact with a blade that represents an aspect of the Raven Queen, and I call this blade, barring a little bit from my fiction, Luce L, which in this context represents the good death, the good death side of the Raven Queen, and that would be merciful death or the death of a villain or possibly a heroic death. And so I kind of see this character as having a bit of an artistic kind of flair, seeing the dance of life and death as almost a kind of poetry in action indeed, and creating this meaning as it weaves through the skein of fate, right? And so looking at this as as a pretty metaphysical and possibly a little wacky kind of way, I think that the Strixhaven school and background that most reflects this is the Prismari. And this gives us some pretty cool role play mojo, synergy between working with the Raven Queen, who already has an affinity for things like dreams and very colorful memories, which she lusts after, and this very artistic school of wizardry coming from Strixhaven. So our Raven's Queen's Herald, Prismari, if we do have access to Strixhaven, gets access to some pretty cool options. And one of them is choice of 2 cantrips. And I'm going to leave those open to you, but it is really nice having access to those 2 extra cantrips. But what we're really here for is a level 1 spell, which a number of game masters I know have also banned, because it is really badass. I'm not certain if it's more badass than Shield. I don't know. Maybe there's just another rules discussion video blog in the future, um, that I need to do on Silvery Barbs in comparison with other first level spells. I still kind of lean towards Shield in general, but for this character, someone who's maybe manipulating fate, I think Silvery Barbs really packs a lot of mojo punch, to be able to apply disadvantage, say for example, to one of your enemies' saving throws when they succeed, or remove advantage when they attack, is really amazing. And And in particular, with this character being so close to the Queen of Fate, the Raven Queen, I think this is really cool. So having that, in addition though, because you're a warlock, you're very limited on your spell slots, and having an extra spell slot with something so potentially pivotal, or game altering, or I guess clutch, as the term may be, as silvery barbs, really helps us out, particularly at low levels. And so that's my mention for Strixhaven, Wizards of the Coast's um, new campaign guide with a lot of extra oomph when it comes to character options. And we did mention power creep before. So moving on, at first level, we come at last to what class we are going to take at first level. And I know I've spoken a lot about Hexblade. I know I've said, yeah, we're only going to dip fighter, but we're going to go ahead and start off as a first level fighter. In particular, if we get the Strixhaven background, because that will give us a little bit of the magic mojo that we want even early on. But why, Rob, you ask me, do we start out as a fighter? And I'm going to give you a number of answers in the letting the perfect be the enemy of the good kind of way. And the first is our constitution. We really want a proficiency in our constitution saving throw. And we did not take variant human, which could have given us that through the resilient feat. So instead, we're just going to get it by going straight into fighter, and that's going to give us proficiency in constitution saving throws, which later on will reap major benefits for us as we go into our spell selection. In addition, it's really going to give us a lot of extra resiliency, especially at low levels. We're going to start out with the max 10 hit points plus our con mod, which is 3, so 13 hit points at first level, which is pretty beefy. In addition, our resilience is also boosted by the wonderful fighter ability called Second Wind. And last of all, we're going to take the fighting style that is defense, the wonderful fighting style that is defense, to add 1 to our armor class. So a whole suite of options, from proficiency in constitution to second wind to higher hit points to defense fighting style, which really helps to make us tougher. And we really want that as a spank and flank Hexblade, because as we level, we're not getting quite as many hit points as your typical core class fighters and paladins, and particularly your barbarians. But we're going to be right up there in the front with him, because we're really going to be going for that flanking in melee. Now, just a really quick mention on equipment. At first level, because we are not yet a Hexblade, we're Dexterity based. So we're going to pick the Rapier, Shield, and Scale Mail, which is going to give us a pretty high AC and some decent combat options, particularly if we have access to the Strixhaven Mage, which will give us those 2 cantrips for our ranged attacks, and a spell that we can use even at first level, even though we are a fighter at first level. Now, I did already talk about level delay. If you want to just go ahead and not let the perfect be the enemy of the good and pick variant human, your ability score choices change a little bit. You start out with 16 charisma and 16 constitution, and you pick resilient constitution at first level, and then you just go all the way to 17 in Hexblade, and have fun that way. And I'm totally doing that in another campaign, so I'm not being hypocritical when I say that this is an option. What I'm just showing you is this pure build, which in and of itself, when it comes to fruition, is hits a bit higher than starting out as variant human. So enough said on that. Moving on to second level, we get our first level of Hexblade Warlock. And when we take this, we get some really nice things. The first is Hexblade Curse, which really lets us set up some Focus Fire as a bonus action, when we apply this curse to a target within 30 feet of us, it enhances our attacks against them to the point that we score critical hits on a 19 through 20. And this is already really nice, but as we level, it's going to get even more nice. And in addition to that, we get to apply our proficiency bonus as a damage bonus to attacks made against the creature that we've applied our Hexblade curse to. So at level 2 with Hexblade, we're already starting to build in our focus fire capability. Now, one thing that I did not mention is also because of picking Hexblade, we get the Hexblade Warrior feature, which allows us to use our charisma for attack bonuses with one melee weapon that is not a two-handed weapon of our choice. And because we are really focused on the blade, I mean, we are a Hexblade after all. We have forged a pact with a blade of the Raven Queen, and because of that, we really want to focus on the cool mojo of the blade. We're going to pick longsword, which is at this level, which is a versatile weapon. We're going to go ahead and dump the shield, and we're going to go two-handed with it. I don't know. You could style it as a katana, or just a two-handed longsword, which is I always just thought was just really cool and thematic. This is going to change as we level for game mechanics purposes, but I really like the idea of starting out with a longsword and then growing in to larger weapons later on. A little spoiler alert there. So at level 2, we get some pretty nice features. And also because spells are really pivotal to this build, I'm going to mention a couple that are very helpful at low levels. And the two that we're going to pick for our known spells are Hexblade Curse, because we want to do that extra 1d6 damage when we decide to focus fire on a foe. And if we can get, I'm sorry, we're going to pick Hex. And when we want to focus fire, we're going to take 2 bonus actions to apply Hex and Hexblade Curse to get an extra 1d6 plus 2 damage on top of our 1d10 plus 3 damage, which at level 2 is some relatively beefy focus fire. I mean, there's probably some level 2 builds that can get a little bit better, but we're doing okay. The other spell that we're going to take is Armor of Agathis, and the reason for this is twofold. We really want those temporary hit points to add some toughness for us at times in combat. And Armor of Agathis really scales extremely well as you level. So that toughness scales, and in addition, when opponents hit you, as you know, Armor of Agathis does 5 cold damage per level cast. So right now at this level, you can deal about 5. You can deal 5 cold damage back each time they hit you, as long as you still have those temporary hit points remaining from that pool, which gives you a little bit of what I call an explosive pinata kind of flair. Your level of explosive pinata is really not that high at level 2. And this is really not an explosive pinata focus spell. We'll get into one of those a little bit later. But even so, Armor of Agathis is too good to pass up. So we're taking Hex and Armor of Agathis at level 2. Now moving on to level 3, we start to get our Eldritch Invocations, and we get 2. But right now there's just one that we are really focused on, and that is Devil's Sight. And I can hear you oohing in the background and saying, "Oh, Rob, I know what you're doing with this. You're going to do some things with darkness." And you know what? It's true. We're going to do some things with darkness, but it might not be exactly what you think. So Devil's Sight is key to that, and I did mention spell selection before, so a little bit of a spoiler before we go on. And we're going to be looking at some spells to really optimize our Devil's Sight. Now, as for the second invocation, I'm just going to hold off on that choice, particularly since I don't want to have to wait until I get a retrain option at level 5. So we're just going to bank our level 2 invocation choice. I'm not certain if that's like technically legal according to rules as written, but I don't really see it being an issue with most game masters. If game masters give you a hard time about it, then pick something that you don't mind retraining when you get to level 5. But for this build guide, we're just going to go ahead and bank it. And as we move on to level 4 and level 3 in Hexblade, we are going to use it when we forge our Pact of the Blade with the Queen of Death in Darkness, right? I don't know, it just sends shivers down my spine to think about this. But okay, so level 4, our mojo is really starting to shine. We forge our pact with this blade associated with the Raven Queen, whatever story you've decided to conjure up to give your character some oomph in the campaign setting as far as story goes. And what this does is this allows us to choose for our invocation improved Pact of the Blade. And this does a number of things for us. First, it allows us to summon a blade that is considered to be magical. It acts as a spell focus for our spells, so we don't need to have any other kind of spell focus or typical spell components that are low cost when we cast spells while holding this sacred weapon of death. And in addition to that, because we took improved Pact of the Blade invocation, we are +1 to hidden damage with this magical blade. Now, the form that this magical blade will now take for us is a greatsword, and that bumps up our damage capability. It also sets us up for feat that we will be taking soon, and I'm sure that many of you have already guessed what feat this might be. In addition, we can use our Hex Warrior feature now with a greatsword because we took improved Pact of the Blade. So things are looking really good for us because we are using our charisma, our force of personality, which is pretty darn cool, to power our use, our skill with a greatsword, which is really awesome. So at level 4, we gain our greatsword, and going back to spells, we also get a spell selection, and as you had probably guessed, I'm going to recommend that we pick Darkness. Now, Darkness is not the core feature of this build, but it does leverage some key capabilities that we've already built in. We're swinging a heavy weapon. We already get to crit on a 19 through 20 if we apply our Hexblade Curse to an enemy. And if we are attacking from darkness with Devil's Sight, we have advantage against the foe that we are attacking, so increasing the likelihood even more that we will crit. So we're now starting to crit fish a little bit with this build. But a word to the wise on darkness. Now the darkness spell is rather large. It's a 15-foot radius, and this can punch a big hole in your allies' capabilities. A lot of effects for your friends rely on sight. Many spells rely on sight to see a creature, and many special abilities that are provided by classes and subclasses also rely on sight. For example, if you happen to have a Vengeance Paladin in your party, they're going to be really ticked off if you pop darkness and they're stuck in the darkness and they can't use their Oath of Enmity on the foe because they can't see, right? Um, so be judicial in your use of darkness. Pick your place, pick your location wisely, and be sure that you're not debuffing your allies unintentionally. Think about your allies with this build. It's having the ability to wade into combat in the way that we're setting up can be very helpful to your allies, but with darkness in this case, it can also be very harmful. Now, there are exceptions. If you happen to have a friend who is playing a Gloomstalker Ranger, for example, they will love you. And you and this Gloomstalker can lurk in darkness together. Or, I don't know, maybe perhaps a Shadow Sorcerer. There are some other classes that also grant the ability to see in magical darkness. And if your party is optimized to see in magical darkness, then wow, really good. But if not, keep in mind your allies, please. Now, some tricks that you can use to help mitigate the the potential disruptiveness of the darkness spell because of its large size. One thing that you could do is cast it on a piece of jewelry. Say, for example, you've crafted a bracelet with a little stone, like a little black stone, maybe an onyx or an obsidian, a piece of obsidian that dangles from this chain at your wrist. And you cast darkness on the stone. It sits there, it dangles, while you're swinging your sword. And then, at the end of your round, as an object interact, you remove your hand from your great sword, swing the stone around, and cover it up with your fist, and that shuts off the darkness, right? And then the next round, you just use a free action to drop the stone. It dangles from the chain, the darkness resumes, you place your hand back on the greatsword, swing away, and then do the interact with object thing again to shut off the darkness. And then this way, the darkness is not as disruptive to your ally. You're kind of running around in a flickering cloud of darkness while gaining advantage on your attacks against creatures that can't see in magical darkness, which is really cool. Now, you're not able to use darkness as a defense in these cases unless you, I don't know, maybe on your off turn, your game master might let you drop the stone as a free action if you're really getting ganked in combat. But it's one possible option that you can use to mitigate the potentially disruptive effects against your allies. Okay, so that completes our fourth level. We are really starting to rock with our spank and flank Hexblade-Fighter. Now, moving on to level 5, level 4 in Hexblade, you guessed it, for our feat/ASI, we pick Great Weapon Master. And this really lets us leverage our increased accuracy while we're attacking in magical darkness to gain our great weapon damage bonus, because the extra accuracy effectively, from rolling 2 dice, effectively cancels out the -5 we're taking to get that +10 on damage. Now, of course, there are situations where you're just going to want to have the accuracy and not take the -5 to hit, even when you're in magical darkness. But having the option to increase your accuracy and leverage that to give you some big damage is going to give us some nice Nova crit potential. Now, at level 5, we're lagging behind a little bit because we haven't yet gotten an extra attack type feature. But we are still pretty amazing when we pop our darkness and add 10 to damage with our greatsword through the Great Weapon Master feat, and manage to crit because we are a crit fisher and we have an expanded crit range, and we also have advantage in magical darkness. And so what does that look like? when we Nova crit, when we perform a Nova and a critical strike in the same round. So in total, it amounts to 6 die 6 plus 34 damage for a total average damage of 55 on a Nova critical round. This is pretty brutal considering that we are not yet getting an extra attack kind of feature, nor are we smiting. So pretty badass damage potential, despite the fact that we haven't yet gotten the extra attack feature. Although, when we come to level 6, which we are doing right now, or actually which we're doing pretty soon, because I did have some extra spell options for you. So I'm sorry, before we move on, we do get to choose an extra spell, and at this level I'm partial to Mirror Image, Shatter, and Misty Step. In particular, Misty Step, because when you want to be somewhere or you want to get away from something, like being grabbed by a dragon and thrown into a boiling pit of lava, you really want to Misty Step the hell out of there. But also AoE Shatter is a good thing to have, and Mirror Image is, definitely will save your bacon, particularly at low levels. So all good choices that I am putting on a silver platter for you to choose from. Now, as we were saying before, level 6, we have finally reached our glorious level 6. And why is this glorious? I mean, I've already talked a little bit about why it's glorious, because we get another invocation in the form of our Warlock class, and we decide to take the invocation that is, say it with me now, Thirsting Blade, right? Because we want that extra attack. We want our regular damage, our consistent damage to be high, and we really want our Nova critical rounds when we do achieve them to really shine. Now, word to the wise on this one, we can only use it with our Pact weapon, but boy, are we Pact weapon focused already. So yeah, we don't have a problem with that. We are a great sword wielder through and through, and this is our way. This is our Tao of Dark Greatsword. I don't know if that works. Okay, so we now have 2 attacks, and when we score a critical hit or kill a creature, we get a bonus action to make a 3rd, which makes us pretty potent in combat. But there is one other little thing, one other little, dare I say, buddy, that is going to help us out even more. And this is what comes from our spell selection in the form of the wonderful spell, the wonderful 3rd level spell that is Summon Faye, that is on the Warlock spell list that we are going to get for our Spank and Flank Hexblade-Fighter. And this for us is going to become a core feature of our build for at least the next 9 levels. It kind of falls off a little bit in tier 3, but even so, it's just the capability that it gives us is absolutely amazing. And I don't know, some of you might not yet have clued in on what I'm mentioning. It's a little bit of a mystery. I'm sorry if I'm holding you on a tenterhook here, but I just really love this synergy. This delicious word. This synergistic mixing of magic and sword play in your little faye flank buddy, which you summon to you from the Shadowfell, a servant of the Raven Queen, who is perfectly equipped with the tricks. Hey, I'm dropping a little hint for you, spoiler alert, with the tricks that you will need to really, really shine, right? Okay. So without further ado, what is this Fae Spirit going to give us? Well, first of all, it's going to give us some extra damage in the form of his attacks or her attacks or their attacks. I don't know. I guess we're non-binary, gender specific or anything like that. So this buddy is going to give us extra damage when they attack in the form of 1d6 plus 1d6 plus, I think it's 3 for this level, or is it 6? I think it's 6. Yep, 2d6 plus 6 additional damage, and that is nothing to shake a stick at. That is awesome, right? Because we are already attacking twice with a greatsword, potentially getting a bonus action for 3, and our flank buddy is doing an average of 13 additional damage with one of his attacks. Awesome, right? There's some serious spank and flankage going on there, right? But that's not all, because remember when we took Devil Sight, and remember when I mentioned that we are summoning a Tricksy Faye from the Shadowfell? Yes, indeed. Our flank buddy, our spank buddy ally, is going to use his bonus action to summon magical darkness in a square, right? Any square adjacent to him. And what would happen if that square just so happened to be when he ended his turn next to you, he summons his magical darkness upon you. And now you are hidden for the next round, right? Gaining all the benefits of darkness, but in one small square, in such a way that does not disrupt your ally, that does not disrupt your allies, that does not require to use any kind of fiddly tricks with the darkness spell. All you need is this wonderful Fey ally that you can summon, and that lasts for an entire hour, so long as you concentrate. Now, who said that Warlocks suck as casters? I mean, hold on. This is just amazing. I don't know. I just want to gush out about this over and over and over again, because as a Gish, this is what your spells are for, to make you kick some serious ass in weapons-based combat. And boy, does this flank buddy deliver. So now we have revealed one of the core features of our Spank and Flank Gish, our Hexblade-Fighter. And our build has now really started to come to fruition. On a Nova critical round, when we are, I call it power attacking with our greatsword, when we were subtracting 5 to hit and adding 10 damage, when we crit, when we get the extra attack with a bonus action, and when our Fey ally also hits, when we have applied our Hexblade Curse, we do a total of 10d6 plus 57 damage for a total of 92. Now that is some serious heat. There are some other builds that can top that, but they have to really start to expend some resources like Action Surge or Smites. We don't have any of those yet, and we are really, really looking at some brutal Nova critical rounds that we can do multiple times if the dice gods so choose for us. So woof, looking really nice. Okay, moving on to level 7. We're going to get another flank buddy in the form of a Cursed Spectre, and now we're kind of walking around with a little menagerie, and we're not too crazy. We're not walking around with 10 dudes, and we're not really slowing down combat, especially since we are nice players and we keep the stats of our flank buddy and our Accursed Spectre close at hand, and we use them to relatively rapidly move through our turns to not cause our friends to stare at us and say, why the hell are you slowing down the game? You're being such a jerk. We don't want to do that. What we want to do, though, is flood the zone with nice allies but not overflood the zone, and we've done that with our flank buddy and our Accursed Spectre. Our flank buddy notably now has 2 attacks because we are a level 6 Hexblade, and our Accursed Spectre also, as at level 3, can do some significant damage add in the form of 3d6 necrotic. So now we're really looking pretty amazing here as a force to control the close range battle or just inhibit enemies by throwing allies into places which are very inconvenient for them. Now, in addition, we do get some more spells. I'm kind of partial to counter spell because when you need it, you really need it. And in addition, it's also worth mentioning that Armor of Agathis has now bumped up to 15 THP and 15 reactive damage, which makes us a little explosive pinata-y here if we so choose to use Armor of Agathis, which also makes us a lot tougher in combat. Now, a word of toughness in combat, having these a word on toughness. Having these allies also provides us like a soft toughness feature because we can throw these allies into places to potentially mitigate damage to us or to our allies, which is really nice. So positioning on the battlefield with this small force is going to be really helpful. Now, worth noting though that we have to kill something in order to get our Spectre first, that being a humanoid creature that is under the effects of our Hexblade curse. So a little bit situational, but still very helpful. Now, moving on to level 8, we get another Eldritch Invocation, and we would be remiss if we did not choose Eldritch Smite. And boy, does Eldritch Smite do a lot for us when we crit at this level. And because we were really looking for something else to help us Nova just a little bit more, right? As if our present Nova capability were not enough. So adding in Eldritch Smite and taking into account the fact that we still only have 2 spell slots to use on our Warlock spell and our smiting. So we're probably summoning our faye flank buddy and reserving our second our second spell slot for Eldritch Smite in case we do smite, because then our Nova critical rounds look even more juicy. Applying the plus 10 damage from Great Weapon Master for all of our attacks, and assuming that our flank buddies hit, and also applying Eldritch Smite, we could max out at a total of 161.5 average damage at level 8. And that is seriously brutal. That is probably at the top of potential Nova ranges for level 8. I'm not sure if I've seen something that's been much more than that. I don't know. Maybe on a paladin fighter build, maybe we'll see. I don't know. But even so, we are seriously looking at some Nova potential here. And we're also looking at some serious consistent damage as well, particularly if we're flooding the zone with 2 allies and gaining the ability to attack from darkness using our Great Weapon Master ability. So at this point, we are really coming into our own. We might want a little bit of accuracy, and we might get it at next level. But before we do, I also do want to mention another spell that adds to our arsenal of darkness tricks. I think you already know what I'm talking about. Shadow of Moil, which would grant us total obscurement in our square, in addition to some nice reactive damage, potentially getting us another explosive pinata trait. Now, this doesn't really run with our mojo as much, so I'm not going to focus on it as much as our flank buddy, our faye summons. But Shadow of Moil is definitely worth having in a focused build like this. There are options. It is an option that you will want to have probably in certain situations, particularly in those where maybe your your faye buddy is going to be less resilient and you're going to be more focused on standing on your own, and you want to pair it with perhaps Armor of Agathis to really deal some harsh retributive damage in the form of 2 die 8 necrotic plus 15 cold when the bads come and wail on you. So So worth looking at, certainly, and something that, at least for me, I want in my back pocket. Now moving on to level 9, level 8 Warlock. We get another feat ASI. And the thing we are looking at, you know it, I know it. Crow, who is sitting in my lap purring, knows it. Elven accuracy. Yes, indeed. We take Elven accuracy. We bump our charisma from 17 to 18. And when we are shrouded in our magical darkness or obscurement from now our multiple sources, our multiple spell sources, and the enemy does not have the ability to pierce that magical darkness, we attack with triple advantage. We make 3 attacks for each attack roll. And oh boy, when we apply Hexblade Curse, we are looking at a lot of crit fishing potential here. So now our spank and flank Hexblade-Fighter has really, really come into her own. She is attacking with a +9 to hit with her magical summoned greatsword. If she gets a better greatsword through item drops, then it might be +10 at this level. Maybe more if you have a really, really generous game master. Excuse me. And this is really accurate, particularly when paired with our hiding in darkness and capability to attack 3 times. So yes, we are really accurate now. We hit really hard. And when we Nova crit, oh boy, does it really hurt. And the likelihood of us Nova critting now is much higher. Now for spells, I'm kind of partial for branching out a little bit here. We've had a really focused build up until this point. But now we can relax. We can stretch out a little bit, particularly if our party is lacking a little bit in the area denial and AoE features. And we can also lean into a little theme that we are not just a creature of darkness, but we are also a creature of light. And so we might choose Sickening Radiance, which is a wonderful spell. And that's going to be at least for me, our first choice here. Our second choice, since if we've taken the Prismari mage background, we might also really enjoy Wall of Fire, which is also an excellent area denial spell that lasts for a long time. And we really want that because we still only have 2 spell slots from our Warlock. And last of all, perhaps we take Freedom of Movement. Freedom of Movement is a nice thing to have, particularly if we are running around against creatures that are much stronger than us, and we are not that strong considering our 8 strength. And Freedom of Movement is really nice, adding to our more focused suite of melee abilities and less so branching out. I'll leave it up to you, but really good choices for spells. All right, so moving on to level 10. Finally, we take the option of Eldritch Pain to enhance our ranged attacks by upping our Eldritch Blast feature. This is something we've had in our back pocket for a while that we probably use now and then when we can't really get into melee. We're not super crazy fast or mobile, so maybe this happens more often than I imagine. But even so, it's really nice to have Eldritch Pain and now add that +4 to each Eldritch Blast strike. Levels 11 through 13. We're going to speed it up a little bit here as we get into tier 3. We're going to pick we're going to get Armor of Hexes at level 11, which gives us a nice defensive buff against a creature that we have applied our Hexblade Curse to, effectively allowing us to spend our reaction to make them or give ourselves a die 6 roll. And if we roll a 4 to 6 and they've hit us, they actually miss instead as the Raven Queen intervenes and twists fate on our behalf. Very nice. Also worth mentioning that by level 11, our Armor of Agathis has bumped up to 25 THP. Actually, this did bump up at level 10. I didn't mention it, but so our Armor of Agathis is really, really nasty at this point. And at level 9 and I'm sorry, at level 10, our flank buddy um, has also maxed out his progression potential. He's still very useful for a number of levels, but now he is really, really starting to shine at level 10 and 11. By level 12, we now have 3 fifth level spell slots, so we're starting to get a little bit more spell versatility. We're not feeling so constrained in our spell use. And also, if we're Strixhaven mage background, we still have our first level slot for Silvery Barbs, which is still a little clutch for us. But also now we can add our Mystic Arcanum, and I'm going to, at least for my build, pick a little bit of versatility and take the massive AoE spell, which is Circle of Death. If you guys want something else, you do you, but I don't know. I'm feeling gishy. I want to still throw down some AoE a little bit here, and I want Circle of Death. I want my Circle of Death, yes. Um, all right, so that's enough for level 12. Moving on to 13, we finally max out Charisma as we reach level 12 in Hexblade. We also pick up the Life Drinker Invocation, which now makes our base consistent damage with a great sword really nasty at 2d6 plus 11, unless we have gotten a better item drop. 2d6 plus 21 when we're using our Great Weapon Master feature, and looks like 2d6 plus 25 when we have added our Hexblade Curse on top of all of that. Oof, really hurting. So we are, yeah, and when we add in our Flank Buddy and our Accursed Spectre, if we got him, we're really doing some nice consistent damage round to round. On a Nova Crit, our capability has reached an amazing potential of 12 die 8 plus 8 die 6 plus 7d8 for 159 individually, plus 10.5 for our Spectre if he hits, and 30 from our Faye Buddy for a total of 199.5. Really, really nice, even at level 13. There are some builds that can outpace this on the Nova, but I'm not sure they can outpace us on the combination of resiliency and battlefield force we bring with our allies, and um, just overall versatility as well. And considering the fact that we are hitting up close to the top of the Nova range, still is nothing to shake a stick at. So moving on to level 14, we're going to lean a bit more into level 14 through 17. We're going to lean a bit more into our creature of light and darkness mojo. We're going to call ourselves ultimately a creature of light, and you guessed it, maddening darkness. But before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about our level 14, level 13 Hexblade Mystic Arcanum, and we are going to pick Crown of Stars. Now, why would I do this? I mean, I'm primarily a melee build. I like my flank buddies. Occasionally, I throw down some AoE. But, there are going to be times when we are unable to throw down our vicious melee, and we want to focus fire at range. And when we do this, we cast Crown of Stars, and we start throwing out these little gleaming bits of light. Now, this does hurt our darkness mojo because we start to glow when we have our Crown of Darkness active. So this is very situational for us. But when we want it, we really want it. And I really like it. You might not agree, so you might want to pick something else. But I like this option. I like this button that I can push to turn myself into a ranged machine gun with Eldritch Blast and Crown of Stars and, I don't know, possibly Hexblade Curse. because at level 15, we get this wonderful ability called Master of Hexes, which basically allows us to regenerate our Hexblade Curse ability when the opponent that had the Hexblade Curse upon it dies. And if we're doing this at range, we are now doing a die 10 plus 4 plus 5 now. So for a total of die 10 plus 9 3 times. And then we're using a bonus action to hurl a star to do 3 die 12 damage plus another 5 because we've applied our Hexblade Curse. So this gives us another second capability as a threat, as a ranged character. And it's just really nice to have that extra capability. What do you think, Crow? Do we Dr. Evil it? I think we do. All right, so going on from our delicious Master of Hexes, we move on to level 16 and level 15 Hexblade, and the Raven Queen has gifted us with more darkness. In fact, a massive, writhing globe of darkness that we can cast out into an enormous radius, I believe, of 60 feet to create these maddening voices that psychically attack your foes and, well, anyone, any poor soul that happens to be in the darkness. And you, with your devil's sight, you can see through this maddening darkness, so you can also apply your attacks through it, particularly your ranged attacks. So when this thing is up, you are denying a very large area, you are buffing yourself, and you are plinking away at your foes with your Eldritch Blasts and perhaps other things. This is really brutal control, and it's nice to have these options. We are still a core spank and flanker. I don't know how I've got splank in there, but you know, we have splanked ourselves into some more gishiness in the form of, whoa, hey, area denial. And so we are a master of magic in addition to being a master of the blade. And this is what we want as a Gish, isn't it? This real deep mojo of magic, sword and sorcery. I love it. So lastly, at level 17, we gain another ASI. And and I must make a correction. We had already maxed out our charisma, so our Eldritch Blasts are doing plus 5 damage, not plus 4. I messed up. So, but yes, at level 17, we get another ASI. And we could pick mobility. Mobility might really do a lot for this build, particularly in getting us closer to the bads and also moving us in and out of combat, which would be really nice, given the fact that we also have some flank buddies to move along with us, but also given the fact that now we are starting to transition away from having flank buddies. We really enjoyed our flank buddies while we had them, but when we move on to level 19, level 18, we're going to be like, bye-bye, flank buddies. I'll tell you why later, but so mobility is a worthy option that we want to consider, but also, since we've built in all this nice versatility, I think we might just want some more resiliency, some more oomph on our concentration checks, some higher hit points, because we have really made a threat for ourselves on the battlefield, and those enemies are really going to want to take us out because we're going to draw some aggro, right? So for me, at least, I am going to take my ASI in Constitution. It really fits with the overall mojo that we've been building all throughout. And right now we have an 18 Constitution. This gives us some really nice stuff in the form of plus 10 on our Constitution saves. Yeah, plus 4 hit points per level. And right now, without magic item support, we're looking at a total of 174 hit points. Woof. I mean, that is really good. And we also have the ability to conjure Armor of Agathis to give us another 25 on top of that, nearly topping that coveted 200 number and applying some really vicious explosive pinata action as well. So yeah, I'm looking to focus on my strengths a little bit here and really add some more in the form of our constitution. Now, level 18, we've fully transitioned away from our flank side and we fully embrace our spank side as we take the Mystic Arcanum that is Foresight, level 9. Now, this day-long spell, which your enemies are really going to want to try and cast a spell magic on, which is why we're glad we have counterspell, maybe, possibly, could be, yes. So yes, this day-long spell gives us some amazing capabilities, particularly in fusion with our elven accuracy, right? So what it does is it gives us advantage on all attacks, all saves, and it gives enemies disadvantage on all attacks against us. It also gives us some other minor benefits, but this is really what we're here for. We are here for the all-day triple advantage that we can apply with our Hexblade Curse and do some serious crit fishing on to apply our Eldritch Smites to the bads. I am loving this. This is making me really regret not taking Half Elf for my version of Beatrice Luciel in Ted's campaign, but Ted might just be like, Rob, thank God you didn't do this. I don't know, maybe talk to your game master before you do this. If you got some, relatively optimized players in your group, they might not mind, but this really, really kicks the optimization up to a whole another level when you start adding in foresight to this fearsome weapon, this fearsome engine of destruction that you and I have constructed together. Yes. All right, so moving on to level 19, we finally take our second level of fighter and woof. Getting action surge on top of all the other stuff that we can do, the smites, the foresight, the triple advantage, the great weapon master, the life drinker. OMG, I am forgetting another spell that I should have mentioned way back in the Wayback Machine, way back at level 7, right? I did talk about Counterspell, but there's another spell in our repertoire that we have picked up at some point, and it is the wonderful thing that is Spirit Shroud. Particularly now that we're not concentrating on our flank buddy, right? We are probably casting Spirit Shroud for an extra 2 die damage on top of our 2 die 6 and all the other wonderful things that we can do with our weapon. Oh, let's do some average damage here. Let's say 2 die 6, right? We've cast Spirit Shroud, so 2 die 6 plus is 7 plus 9 from Spirit Shroud. We have a 20 charisma that gives us plus 10 from Life Drinker and our ability score bonus. So that's what, 26, right? We have a plus 1 weapon, probably better, but we're not going to add this into the build guide. So what was that? 27. We're adding 10 from Great Weapon Master because we have triple advantage. So that's for 37. We're doing 74 damage if we hit twice. 111 if we hit 3 times. That's without smiting. Holy cow. Wow. I mean, that's some serious consistent damage, right? Right? I mean, there's probably some fighter builds that do a bit more, but not with our accuracy. No way, no way, Jose. All right, so yeah, but now, right, we apply action surge to all that gloriousness. And I'm not going to do a Nova crit for you until level 20, but whoa, we just came to level 20, so here we are. What do we pick at level 3 fighter? Because we are definitely taking level 3 fighter. We are now a level 17 Hexblade. We are now a level 3 fighter who has taken, I think for us, what we are taking is Battle Master. And the reason why we are taking Battle Master as we want Riposte. And why do we want Riposte? We want Riposte because we want to be able to apply the Eldritch Smite not just on our regular turn when we crit, and we will be critting many times because of our triple advantage and our Hexblade Curse, but we also want to apply our Eldritch Smite on the off turn now and then, because we can do that now that we have Riposte, which gives us an off turn attack. Hello. So what does our Nova Critical plus Riposte round look like at level 20? Thank goodness I've already done the math for you and myself on this, but it is devastating. On our on turn, we do 24 die 8. Now, this is assuming that we have cast Spirit Shroud, and we are concentrating on that we have applied our Hexblade Curse, and that we are using our Great Weapon Master feature to add 10 to our damage. So when we do that, and when we crit, when we have a critical hit, and when we apply the Eldritch Smite damage and one of our other Battle Master maneuvers, we do a total of 24 die 8 plus 12 die 6 plus 135 for an average of 285 damage on our turn. And then when an enemy attacks us and misses because we have Foresight, we use our Riposte to attack him again and apply an Eldritch Smite as well, granting us a total of 359.5 damage. Holy damage, Batman. Holy damage, Crow. What do you think about this, huh? Do we have a new max damage winner totem? Ha ha! Yes, we do. This does outpace our Dexidin from the last build. And in addition, it also has all the juiciness of the wonderful AoEs and other spell options that we have picked up along the way, because we are very gishy and we love our gishiness. We have also the explosive pinata feature in the form of our Armor of Agathis, which right at this level is still pretty beefy at 25 hit points of cold damage. And we are also probably a bit more resilient, if not as high in armor class, despite the fact that our paladin is getting a die 10 hit points per level. Now, the exception would be if we got some wonderful item drops. The paladin would really love a Holy Avenger, for example, and that would bump the paladin's max damage potential against certain enemies through the roof, right? But this build also has a beautiful item drop potential if your game master happens to be so generous. This build really, really, really loves a Vorpal Sword. Could you imagine that? Let's just think about the beauty that would be a Vorpal Luciel Good Death, a headhunting feature on our swift, light, and artistic Herald of the Raven Queen as she walks off with you into the sunset of our character optimization guide. Thank you so much for joining me. I am going to give for you a round of applause if you decide to use this Gish build. People will say, oh, Warlocks, you can't really optimize them that well in 5e. They don't have enough spell slots for you. And boy, oh boy, think of all the wonders that you can do with all the beautiful synergy between long-term spells, a smite feature, and those juicy, juicy invocations, which we have used to such great effect throughout the wonderful and illustrious career that is my gift to you, the Raven Queen's Herald. I hope you enjoy. Please feel free. This build has already been posted over on Scribbler's Fantastical Workshop, which is scribblersfantasticalworkshop.wordpress.com. Yay, I said it really fast. Say it fast 3 times for me, and you will remember. So please feel free to stop by, add your comments on my build guide. You may hate it, you may love it, you may have further suggestions on how we can be evil masterminds together and improve this already wonderful build. And I will also be posting this video blog on YouTube if you wish to use it as a reference and you don't like to wade through a giant wall of text. Trust me, I understand. So thank you for joining me. Love you all. See you soon. And let's see, turn this off.